week, all year round. On 94.9 FM, this is West Africa Democracy Radio. We got you covered. We got you covered on all fronts. News, programs, special shows, and lots of all new music. From Dakar to Benin, from Nigeria to Ghana, Conakry, Bissau, Niger, Togo, Côte d'Ivoire, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Mali, Mauritania, Ouagadougou, Cape Verde to the Gambia. This is your radio. This is your voice. Your voice. This is West Africa Democracy Radio. And we are on air. We're on air. West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar. It's NEWSLINK.
WADR. West Africa Democracy Radio.
WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Banjul, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online on wadr.org. This is NEWSLINK, and here are the top stories. Nigeria's junta leader, General Chani, ends his friendly visit to Bamako with a call for support on the lifting of economic sanctions on Niamey. The second session of ECOWAS' fifth legislature gets underway in Abuja with an emphasis on saving democracy.
The current session comes at a time when the region is struggling to cope with a hostile international environment that has not only impacted negatively on their economies, but also their capacity to finance community programs and activities.
The Chadian presidency grants amnesty to persons involved in the October 2022 deadly confrontations and cases of gender-based violence assault in Côte d'Ivoire, according to officials. Details of these stories and more coming up shortly.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us and warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, and Liberia. Let's begin in Mali, where the president of Nigeria's transitional government, General Abdurrahman Chani, has completed a short working visit. The Niamey strongman's visit to his Malian counterpart was aimed at strengthening relations, particularly security and economic relations between Niger and Mali within the alliance of Sahel states. During their tete-a-tete, General Chani asked for Mali's support in dealing with the ECOWAS sanctions that are hitting Niger hard. San Donald Mendy has won this report by Bamako correspondent Aliu Cham.
General Abdurrahman Chani's visit to Malian capital lasted just a few hours. At Koloba Palace, the presidents of Niger and Mali had a one-to-one meeting. At the core of the discussions was the pooling of efforts in the new alliance of Sahel states to combat terrorism in the region, a security challenge that Mali, Niger, and Burkina hope to meet together. General Abdurrahman Chani is the Nigerian interim president.
Through this Sahel alliance, the Sahel people, especially in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have taken it upon themselves to be on the promised land, and that nothing will turn them away from their objective, which is to make the Sahel a zone of prosperity and not an area of insecurity.
Since the coup on July 26, Niger has been subjected to ECOWAS sanctions that have affected its people. The head of Niger's junta, General Chani, is counting on Mali's support to cope with the embargo imposed on his country.
Concerning the embargo, we are going to ask for support once again, even if we know it is already acquired. But we want to renew it to live up to the support of Mali so that this embargo is lifted.
After his visit to Bamako, Abdurrahman Chani headed for Ouagadougou. According to sources, ministerial meetings of the Sahel Alliance states are scheduled in Bamako next week to set up the alliance bodies.
San Donald Mendu, that report filed in by our Bamako correspondent Aliyu Cham. Now, the second ordinary session of the 5th legislature of the ECOWAS Parliament is underway in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. The session opened with parliamentarians from member states urging reflection on the trajectory of democracy, good governance, and implementation of policies that meet the socio-economic needs of the populations. These shortcomings, they say, allow the creeping incursion of army into policy of the region, which is not only a misnomer, but also a demonstration of deficiency. WADR's Usman Umar completes the story.
A notable guest at the session was the president of the ECOWAS Court, Justice Edward Amoako Asante. In his speech, Justice Asante explains that if appropriate measures are not taken to stop the creeping military incursion into politics, democracy is under threat, with implications for institutions such as the parliaments and the courts.
The current session comes at a time when the region is struggling to cope with a hostile international environment that has not only impacted negatively on their economies, but also their capacity to finance community programs and activities.
Justice Asante assured that the court will help to enrich a culture of respect for the rule of law, accountability, and political stability through fidelity to its mandate. He, however, admonished the regional parliament to continue the conversation by revisiting the debate on the particularities of democracy for a competitive international environment. For his part, Mohammed Sidi Tunis, ECOWAS Speaker of Parliament, is urging effective leadership to undertake the necessary engagement through national parliaments to interrogate the region's current democratic culture.
That we establish enabling policies and regulations at the national level to encourage incentives to make our region an appealing destination. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a significant step in this direction as it seeks to improve economic activities within the continent and promote intra-Africa trade.
The session, which opened on Wednesday, November 22, will last until Friday, December 15, 2023. The program will witness the swearing-in of new legislatures to the parliament and will feature the sitting of joint committees ranging from agriculture, environment, natural resources, health and legal affairs to human rights. Other committees are those of social affairs, gender and women empowerment. For NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Elsewhere, the National Transition Council in Chad on Thursday adopted the bill providing amnesty for all those involved in the bloody events of October 20, 2022. Imo Edet has more.
The presidential amnesty made headlines in national dailies across the country, including the online newspaper alwidainfo.com. This online media reported that the said law was voted for by 145 members of the Transitional Legislative Council, while 6 deputies voted against it and 2 others abstained. This amnesty comes a few weeks after the return from exile of the opponent, Success Masara, on October 31, following mediation by Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi. Recall on August 20, 2022, a large number of Chadians took to the streets of N'Djamena and other cities to protest the extension of the transition and the retention in power of Mahamat Debi Itno for 2 additional years. These demonstrations turned out bloody following clashes between the protesters and security operatives. While authorities reported 73 deaths, the opposition, political groups and NGOs claim more than 200 fatalities. This figure remains disputed, but certainly some 600 people, including minors, were arrested and charged with insurrection. Following several hearings, some of the demonstrators were released and others pardoned. In the meantime, political observers in Chad believe Success Masara's return to the country and his efforts towards national reconciliation weeks before the referendum may foster cohesion.
Imo Edet reporting there. And the 9th National Youth Forum, organized each year by the Association Alternative Espace Citoyen, kicks off today, Friday, in Niger. The theme of the forum, which brings together several young people from the country's 8 regions, is the security crisis and disruption of democratic processes in the Sahel, challenges and prospects.
More stories, Coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. NewsLink continues.
As a reminder, we are live on wadr.org. Benin Republic is looking ahead to 2060 for the actualization of its development roadmap marking 100 years after independence. Launched on Thursday, the project will work to formulate and articulate a long-term national development strategy to meet the major challenges in the country. Representatives of the nation's dynamic forces, ambassadors, and representatives of diplomatic and consular missions to Benin were invited to take part in the exercise. Ogebe Rika tells us more.
Benin is embarking on a new adventure as the deadline for Vision 2025 Alafia approaches. The final evaluation has been completed and the Beninese government has decided to launch the second generation of long-term outlook studies. The country intends to strengthen its capacity for anticipation and action in the face of the profound changes and transformations underway or to come, both nationally and internationally. The leaders have chosen the year 2060 as the horizon for projecting the desired development of Benin 100 years after its independence. The process of building this vision will involve all the major components of the nation. First of all, there will be an assessment of the implementation of the 2025 Alafia document and the capitalization of best practices from the government's action program for 2016 to 2021 and 2021 to 2026 in order to identify the main development directions and to facilitate the involvement of all the skills required for the harmonious implementation of the process. The government has adopted an institutional framework responsible for coordinating and monitoring the construction of Vision 2060, validating the document drawn up and ensuring the mobilization of the various sections of the population. The members of this institutional framework were also installed by the Minister of State, Abdullahi Baochan. The government will submit the vision, which will be drawn up by consensus, to Parliament for a vote.
Ogebe Ruka with that report. Now, correction officers across Liberia have staged a go-slow action, thus preventing inmates from entering and leaving prison facilities due to unpaid wages. The go-slow prompted swift intervention from police officers who were forced to mend various prisons to prevent a jailbreak. WADR's Moravia correspondent Daliton Popper tells us more.
The correctional officers are pinned for several reasons, including the non-payment of allowances owed them by the government, the inadequate food and medical supplies, among others. They are also threatening a total shutdown, which implies abandoning their duties posed in all facilities across the country. According to the Director of Prison Services, Sedesi Kweda, his officers are also demanding the payment of special allowance following the just and the elections.
They wanted to make sure that they were filtered in the payment process of electoral security. It is something that was considered to be genuine and to be in the interest of national security. And we want to appreciate the Attorney General of the Republic of Liberia for remaining very civil and listening, because we are in such a peculiar time and our national security is paramount. And as we speak, all prisons have been ordered open, admissions and releases.
Speaking to a team of journalists following the go-slow, Joint Security spokesman Moses Carter assures of the government's commitment to resolving the concerns raised.
And as a way of ensuring that issues are resolved amicably, we had a sit with officials and officers of the Bureau of Corrections and Rehabilitation here at the Ministry of Justice, basically aimed at ensuring that their issues with payment are resolved. The healthy exchanges today, we reached a very good conclusion of our meeting that led to all of the parties leaving with a win-win situation.
Carter attributed the delay to a breakdown in communication between the Liberian Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Finance. For NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Popper in Monrovia.
And just before our recap, Burkina Faso said at least 570 people have reportedly died from dengue fever between January 1 to November 19. Addressing a press conference on Thursday, the director of the Health Emergency Response Operations Center, Joseph Subaiga, said health officials reported over 13,890 cases, including 6,820 probable cases and 59 deaths between November 13 to 19. From January 1 to November, more than 123,000 suspected cases have been reported, including 56,637 probable cases and 570 deaths, with a fatality rate of 1%, he said. According to the ministry, the main centers of dengue cases in the country are Ouagadougou, the nation's capital, and Bobo-Dioulasso in the west. Meanwhile, Tongmei Laboratories, a pharmaceutical company headquartered in Togo, said most of the drugs for the treatment of dengue produced recently have been requested and purchased by the Burkinabe pharmaceutical market. You are listening to NewsLink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal on 94.9 FM. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Nigeria's junta leader, General Chani, ends his friendly visit to Bamako with a call for support on the lifting of economic sanctions on Niamey. The second session of ECOWAS's fifth legislature gets underway in Abuja with an emphasis on saving democracy. The Chadian presidency grants amnesty to persons involved in the October 2022 deadly confrontations. Still ahead in the news, cases of gender-based violence surge in Côte d'Ivoire, according to officials. We also have the guest interview and sports update. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Ghana's Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, PURC, has announced a decrease in electricity tariffs effective December 1, 2023. This adjustment aligns with the Commission's quarterly tariff review mechanism, considering factors like the US dollar to Ghana cedi exchange rate, domestic inflation, electricity generation mix, and fuel costs, particularly natural gas. Water tariffs, on the other hand, have seen an increase of 0.34% for the same period based on similar key indicators used by the Commission. WADR's Na Diditete highlight factors considered by the Commission.
According to the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, it used a weighted average Ghana cedis to the US dollar exchange rate, standing at 11 Ghana cedis 9 pesos for the fourth quarter of 2023, inclusive of an under-recovery of 0 Ghana cedis 37 pesos. Secondly, the projected inflation rate was assessed with an average 3-month projection of 40.43% for the fourth quarter. However, the actual rate applied was 10.11% of the same period. Additionally, the pricing of natural gas played a crucial role. Finally, the anticipated electricity generation mix, composed of hydro and thermal sources, was projected at 31.91% for hydro and 68.09% for thermal power for the fourth quarter. Regarding the tariff outcomes, electricity tariffs have been universally reduced by 1.52% for the same period, while water tariffs have experienced an increase of 0.34%, using identical indicators for the fourth quarter of 2023. This will be the first time in a long while consumers are experiencing a reduction, albeit marginal, in electricity tariffs. The last time there was such a development was in March 2018. For WADR, I am Nadi Teti, Accra.
Let's take you to Côte d'Ivoire, where 5,360 cases of gender-based violence, GBV, were recorded and treated between January 2023 and September 2023. These figures were announced by Josiane Bessie, Director of the National Program to Combat GBV. In 2022, nearly 8,000 cases of gender-based violence, GBV, were recorded and treated, compared with nearly 5,400 between January and September 2023. These figures show the reality of gender-based violence in Côte d'Ivoire. 6 types of GBV that have been identified in Côte d'Ivoire are rape, sexual assault, physical assault, early marriage, denial of resources, opportunities and services, and psychological and emotional violence. The country ranks 155 out of 170 nations in the gender Inequality Index 2021, according to Josiah Bessie, the head of the national program to combat GBV. The Ivorian government has developed several strategies to combat the persistence of gender-based violence, including innovative legislation and initiatives.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In the interview segment, we will be examining developments emanating after the election victory of the former opposition Unity Party's candidate Joseph Boakai in Liberia. Expectations of the population from the president-elect are hitting the roof, just as he promised in a post-victory speech, an inclusive government considering the harsh political climate before, during, and even after the elections. There have been a back-and-forth debates on these issues across the country, but the most important of them all is how the president-elect Joseph Boakai will restore the economy, create job opportunities, and deliver justice. Our guest, Adama Dempster, National Secretary General of the National Civil Society Human Rights Advocacy Platform of Liberia, gives his views on the point missed by the outgoing government.
Okay, thank you so much, Imon, and of course, greetings to my colleagues, both Kanyo and Mo. And of course, from our own perspective, that is, we come from the civil society, the human rights community, and we follow this election very, very, closely. That is before, during, and after the election. We also following post-election era as to how things are playing right now. But overall, to where Liberia found itself, I think I can say the country is gearing towards moving forward. But in moving forward, there are a whole lot of uncertainty, like Kanye said, about the division, both on political and ideological lines. And more besides the ethnic aspect, we saw how the votes from different regions, came out. That is, there is a need to also look at that in the context of what may be a national hearing reconciliation process in a very near future. But what is important right now is that governance moving forward in Liberia, it is the appetite, the anxiety of all Liberians. If you take over the country from another government, the anxiety have not changed. People want to see improvement, livelihood, living standards of people improved. And the issue of addressing the economic, social challenges that the country face over the time, those are things that common Liberians, ordinary Liberians are yearning for. So seeing President-elect Joseph Boakai coming into play from the civil society, we congratulated him and his party. We also commended President Weah for his steadfast leadership in conceding and congratulating his counterpart, Ambassador Boakai. That set the tone.
Mr. Dempster, let's talk about what the outgoing government could have done and were not able to do. What do you think they missed at some point in their tenure?
I remember very closely when the CDC government was in the opposition. There were a number of areas of their interventions, their campaigns, their own party manifesto that has to do with if they took over, they were going to make sure that these things are put into perspective and implemented. I remember the aspect of addressing Civil War era crime, atrocities that were committed during the Civil War. That is setting up of a war and economic crimes court to prosecute alleged perpetrators, violators of human rights during the Civil War era. And unfortunately, that did not happen. And another aspect has to do with, it is always, I don't know whether the practice should change, that when you take over, when a government takes over, it is quite important that you need to audit or do a forensic examination of the government you're taking over from. That will help and give you, put in the perspective heading ahead. So the aspect of accountability, I don't think it is something wrong. Accounting for your deeds, accounting for the work that you've done over the time to put your institution into perspective. That is give an appraisal of your government is something that is very important. It really allows you to go with your heads up that during the period of 6 years, my governance was able to put things into perspective that today we can boast of that will bring us back into the next term if it can be showing from a report.
Adama Damstar, National Secretary General of the National Civil Society Human Rights Advocacy Platform in Liberia, join Imo Edet tomorrow at 10 a.m. on Weekly Top News for more on that discussion and review of major headline stories during the week. It's now time for sports update. Let's join Sankule Janko.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Nigeria international striker Taiwo Awoyini will be out for a couple of months after sustaining a groin injury. The Nottingham Forest forward reportedly aggravated the injury while playing for Super Eagles during the international break. The forward has had an operation on the injury, which is expected to keep him on the sidelines for a long period. Awoyini played for Nigeria during their World Cup qualifiers against Lesotho and Zimbabwe last week. Elsewhere, Senegal have called for France to be disqualified from the Under-17 World Cup after fielding a potentially ineligible player during the group stages of the tournament, according to media reports. Forward Yanis Issoufou, who featured 3 times for the French team during the ongoing tournament, was not included in their match against Senegal after reports of his ineligibility emerged. Issoufou reportedly represented Nigeria's Under-17s in the qualifier of this same tournament. Article 24 of FIFA rules prohibit a player from representing 2 nations during the same tournament. Senegal, who were defeated on penalties by France, called on FIFA to disqualify France from the tournament, which will give them a chance to be reinstated into the tournament. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
Sports is brought to you by Sankule Janko. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of NewsLink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal on 94.9 FM. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Christian Mukidi and Mustafa Sek for the technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service, and stream live on WADR.org. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to NewsLink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0, and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County. For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and